A former AEW star is not happy with AEW. We're going to explain why, and then I'm going to give you guys my thoughts and opinions on that. Also, AEW having a hard time selling tickets, but they're not the only promotion to do so. So we're going to talk about this because I feel like there is a disconnect right now between fans and wrestling, and I think I know why, but I want to get your guys' opinion on that as well. As always, my name is Ango, and on this channel, I bring you guys daily news videos, so if you guys like this type of stuff, go ahead and click subscribe. So really quick, Wrestling Entertainment Series in the UK. We talked about this before. WES is this new promotion by the former AOP. And we talked about Lena Fanine, a.k.a. Nia Jax, who was upset because now she's being falsely advertised for the event. And we talked about whether or not this event will continue to go on because the event was originally scheduled for July 9th. However, it appears, and this is such an interesting thing, but it appears that this 10,000 seat venue that was booked has only sold 350 tickets. Obviously, if this was an indie show in a small warehouse or, small concert venue or something like that, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. However, right now, there seems to be a disconnect in pro wrestling. And when you look at the talent that was announced for this card originally, and then you see how it's transpired through the weeks, and you've seen how much has changed, obviously there is very little interest in this event, which is really strange because, they have championship matches. It's supposed to be a new promotion. They obviously brought in some heavy hitter names. Then they replaced a few people with lesser known names. And, when I was looking at the prices, it just appeared to be too high. So my question to you guys is, why do you think people are not interested in Wrestling Entertainment Series, especially when you consider that they were bringing in Alistair Overeem versus Braun Strowman, aka Adam Scherr? That's a pretty massive matchup. I'm not saying it's going to be like the biggest matchup of all time, but for some reason there appears to be less interest in this event, which actually brings me to AEW Dynamite, because AEW Dynamite in Rochester, New York, has only, it's about a 7,000 seat arena, maybe a little bit more. They've only distributed so far 4,600 tickets, and we are just hours away from the show. And so what is the reason why people aren't interested in going to one of these two shows? Whenever you think of Wrestling Entertainment Series, obviously they're a newer company, but even AEW, who has now been in business for 3 or 4 years, they're having some inconsistency within their ticket purchases. And by the way, AEW is not the only company to experience this, because WWE is also experiencing this. Now, in recent months, I can only talk about what I have seen personally from my own perspective. I went to WWE Raw in Detroit a couple of weeks after WrestleMania. Cody Rhodes was there. That entire arena was absolutely packed. I was also at Blood and Guts at Little Caesars Arena, and that place was incredibly packed. And that was AEW's first time show in Detroit. So I don't know if this is a lack of interest in AEW. I don't know if it's a lack of interest in WWE. For Wrestling Entertainment Series, I think there's a little bit more to understand, because obviously, the card isn't as strong anymore. It's a very, very aggressive, it's a very aggressive action to take, trying to fill up a 10,000 seat arena for a debut show that's had multiple postponements. But also, I look at WWE and AEW and WES, and I'm thinking, is there a disconnect between wrestling fans and the wrestling product? I know a lot of times people are bringing up the ratings and they go up and down. WWE's ratings are starting to go back up. Then AEW's ratings bounced back up. But it's been pretty inconsistent. And I think the only thing I could wrap my head around, and this is why I'm talking about this, because I'm very curious to know what you guys genuinely think about this. Do you guys think that people are just less interested in wrestling? Or do you guys think that people no longer prioritize wrestling? And I'm starting to think it's the latter. Me personally, this past weekend for July 4th, I really want to enjoy myself this weekend. And because of that, I went out and I wasn't home. I went to go enjoy myself. Now, granted, I've been doing YouTube full time now for 9 or 10 months. I don't take breaks. This was my first break that I took. And I came back, and the talk about Money in the Bank was good. A lot of people said that Rampage was good. A lot of people said SmackDown was bad. But overall, everybody had a pretty good review of what was happening in wrestling. And I'm just starting to think that with the way we consume wrestling entertainment and the way that we talk about wrestling and the way that we have access to it through YouTube and social media and these highlights and these clips, I feel like right now in wrestling, there isn't nothing necessarily must see. So if there's an opportunity to go on a quick vacation or go out with your friends or go watch sports or, the NBA Summer League or whatever it may be, I think certain things now it's starting to get to the point with wrestling where I think people are okay with missing out. FOMO, fear of missing out. It's a real thing, and I think some people don't really care if they miss out on wrestling these days. I'm not sure if that's because the overall product in wrestling is good or bad. I don't know, because I feel like it's mixed reviews. Some days, WWE is good and some days WWE is outright terrible. Sometimes AEW is really good and then sometimes they're outright terrible. Dynamite in Detroit was absolutely fun to see. It was their debut show in Detroit and it was very successful. But for some reason, these companies, I feel like in a weird way, they're kind of struggling to be consistently drawing. And I don't know if this is just a temporary thing or as technology continues to advance and we continue talking about wrestling on the internet, if that is something to look out for. I find it very interesting. I find it very interesting that AEW is having a hard time selling out in Rochester, New York. But ultimately, I don't know if it actually falls on the product. I just think it's summer, the weather is good. People, they're just no longer prioritizing it. And then I think what we'll end up seeing is like once we get to the fall, once we get to the winter, maybe there's going to be a change in these trends. But ultimately, I want to know what you guys think. I think it makes for a really good conversation. My job is to criticize and praise WWE, AEW, and all these promotions. But realistically, I can't find a reason as to why somebody wouldn't want to be there other than real life taking priority. You guys may have heard Marco Stunt being pretty vocal about the promo that Christian Cage talked about, or he had a promo on Dynamite and he mentioned Marco Stunt, and Marco Stunt wasn't too happy about this. He actually had an interview with NBC Sports Boston, and he was asked basically how he felt about his name being used in the promo, and he said, "I was not aware that it was going to be said or anything. For them to do it in that context, I thought it was kind of lame. I mean, it makes sense though in a way. I was part of that group before him, and what he's basically saying is he came in and got me fired. So in a story sense, I love it. In a real life sense, hey, it is what it is, I guess." Now, the thing is, Marco Stunt, obviously, when you look at Jurassic Express and their whole thing from the beginning of AEW really had something special with those three because the crowd loved it. I didn't understand it at first, but when I was there at Double or Nothing and when I was there at All Out and I seen these guys together, people loved Jurassic Express. And over time, I think they did make the right decision to eventually have Christian come in. I don't have an issue with Christian coming in. Obviously, they're telling the story of him trying to mentor Jungle Boy. I think it works out really well, especially now that they turned Luchasaurus heel. I just think, with AEW, things are unscripted, for the most part. Not everything is scripted. It's not as heavily scripted as WWE. And so I just want to know what you guys think. Obviously, he was a little bit bothered by this, and here's the thing. I'm not trying to give AEW shit here, but relationships matter. You know what I mean? And if this is something that continues to happen for other talent, I could see a lot of people being rubbed off by the product. I don't think that will be the case, but you just never know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below.